It was October 22, 2019. The courtroom in Tampa sank into a heavy silence as Hillsborough Circuit Judge Christopher Sabella prepared to speak. Amber Perera stood at the defense table, 31 years old, hands folded, eyes forward, her future compressed into the next few sentences. Behind her, the benches were filled with members of the Felipak family, some holding each other, others staring ahead with faces shaped by years of grief, exhaustion, and waiting. This moment had taken years to arrive, but it would be over in minutes. Before announcing the sentence, Judge Sabella referenced a recorded phone call from the county jail. In that call, Perera told a family member that her life was ruined. The judge paused, then looked directly at her. Yes, he said, her life was ruined, but she had also ruined other lives and ended 3. The words landed with a quiet finality. There was no shouting, no drama, just the sound of breath catching across the room. The sentence followed. 50 years in state prison. A number that didn't scream, but echoed. Soft sobs rose from the victim's family. Prosecutors had asked for life. The defense argued for 20 years and probation, pointing to her lack of criminal history. One side wanted everything taken. The other wanted a future preserved. The judge chose something else entirely. 5 decades. At 31, that meant Amber Perera would be 81 years old before she ever saw freedom again, if she lived that long. What most people watching that day didn't immediately grasp was this simple truth. She hadn't just been sentenced to prison. She had been sentenced to time. For a crime that lasted less than a minute, she would give up decades. This documentary is not about whether she deserved punishment. It is about what years of incarceration does to a human being and whether justice serves vengeance. The afternoon that changed everything was August 10, 2017. A Thursday, the kind of ordinary weekday no one remembers until it becomes a permanent marker in their life. Around 4 p.m., traffic moved steadily along the Leroy Selman Expressway in South Tampa. Commuters were heading home. Parents were thinking about dinner. Children were strapped into car seats, unaware of how fragile the next few minutes would be. Amber Perera was driving eastbound in her Kia near Euclid Avenue. According to investigators, her speed was extreme, well over 100 miles per hour, possibly closer to 120. At that velocity, reaction time disappears. There is no room for correction, no second chances. Her blood alcohol content would later register at 0.10, above Florida's legal limit. Marijuana was also present in her system. Impaired judgment combined with reckless speed created a scenario that could only end one way. She lost control. The Kia slammed into the rear of a Hyundai carrying the Felipak family. The force of the impact was catastrophic. The Hyundai was launched forward, crossing the median and entering westbound traffic, where it was struck again, first by a Jeep, then by an Infiniti SUV. Metal folded. Glass exploded. The vehicle ignited. Inside the Hyundai were 41-year-old Luis Felipak, his 29-year-old wife Rita, and their 8-year-old daughter, Georgia. A family doing nothing wrong. A child whose biggest concerns that day were likely trivial, fleeting, innocent. All 3 died at the scene. 2 of the bodies were burned so severely they could not be immediately identified. An entire family erased in seconds. But the story does not end at the point of impact. In many ways, this is where it becomes even more disturbing. Amber Perera did not stop. She continued driving at high speed, her vehicle sustaining massive damage as she fled the scene. Eventually, the Kia began to disintegrate. Tire ripped free. Parts scattered across the roadway. A witness followed her, watching in disbelief as she attempted to escape the consequences of what she had just done. Police arrived minutes later. Perera was transported to the hospital with injuries that were not life-threatening. While the Felipaks lay dead on the roadway, she survived. At the hospital, investigators attempted to collect a blood sample. According to police reports, Perera attempted to conceal the evidence. When confronted, her behavior became erratic, uncooperative. A second blood draw had to be performed. Initially, she claimed she had suffered a seizure. This would become central to her defense. Her attorneys later argued that Perera suffered from daily seizures and was prescribed medications, including Ativan and Lexapro. Coworkers testified that she had experienced seizures at work, even earlier that same morning. The implication was clear. This was not recklessness, they argued. It was a medical episode. But the blood evidence told a different story. She was intoxicated. She was speeding. And after killing 3 people, she fled and attempted to hide what she had done. In court, these facts would matter. Not just the crash itself, but the choices made before and after it. The decision to drink. The decision to drive. The decision to flee. The decision to conceal evidence. Each one stacking on top of the last. Vehicular homicide is often framed as an accident, a tragedy, something unfortunate but unintentional. This case resisted that framing. The prosecution emphasized agency. These were not random events. They were choices, and those choices left survivors behind. One of them was Tracy Kelly. Kelly was driving one of the vehicles that struck the Felipak family's car after it crossed the median. She survived. But survival in this context came with a cost. Her physical injuries were significant, but the psychological damage proved far more enduring. She would later tell the court that her life effectively ended that day, even though her body continued to function. At sentencing, Kelly did not ask for mercy. She asked for something else entirely. She wanted Amber Perera to hear the word life and feel it taken away, just as the Felipaks had their lives taken from them. This is what remains after vehicular homicide. Not just statistics or case numbers, but shattered lives that continue long after the headlines fade. Parents who will never see their children grow up. Survivors who relive the moment endlessly. Families divided into before and after. By the time the courtroom proceedings ended, the legal facts were settled. But the deeper consequences were only beginning. When the judge finally spoke, the courtroom listened for a single word. Life. 50. 20. Numbers that would determine the shape of a human existence. Amber Perera was sentenced to 50 years in state prison. At 31 years old, that sentence functioned as a life term by another name. If she serves every day, she will be 81 before she is released. That is assuming she survives incarceration at all. What many people fail to grasp in moments like this is what such a sentence actually entails. Not conceptually, not morally, but practically. As of late 2025, Perera has served approximately 6 years. That leaves 44 remaining. She is now 37 years old. She will age entirely within the prison system. She will experience menopause behind bars. She will watch her parents grow old and die through phone calls and letters. She will witness the world transform without participating in it. Technology will advance. Culture will shift. Entire ways of living will disappear. And she will remain confined to a small, controlled environment designed not for living, but for containment. Florida's prison system houses thousands of women across multiple facilities. Medical care is limited. Dental treatment can take months. Mental health services are strained. For someone serving decades, this means aging in a system ill-equipped to care for aging bodies and deteriorating minds. Daily life is monotonous by design. Wake up around 5:30 a.m., eat processed institutional food. Report to a prison job paying cents per hour. Return to the same cell. Repeat. 365 days a year. No weekends. No holidays. No meaningful variation. Every birthday occurs behind bars. Every Christmas. Every New Year. Every personal milestone stripped of context and shared experience. Time loses its markers. Days blur. Years collapse into routine. This is the psychological weight of long-term incarceration. Not the shock of imprisonment, but the erosion. The slow grinding away of identity, purpose, and connection. Unlike death row inmates, long-term prisoners fade into obscurity. Death row cases generate attention, appeals, media coverage, advocacy. There is movement even if it leads nowhere. Long-term inmates experience something else entirely. They are forgotten. Psychologists refer to this as civil death. The individual remains biologically alive while ceasing to exist socially. Relationships dissolve. Identity becomes inmate number. The ability to impact the world disappears. For Perera, this means living with the knowledge of what she did, without any meaningful avenue to address it. She cannot restore what was taken. She cannot make amends. She cannot contribute in a way that reaches beyond prison walls. Remorse becomes static, frozen. Some death row inmates have described life imprisonment as worse than execution. Several have abandoned appeals, preferring an end to the indefinite waiting. Now imagine that psychological burden stretched across half a century. This is not 20 years. It is 50. A lifetime measured in concrete, steel, and routine. To understand the true weight of a 50-year sentence, it helps to reduce it to numbers. Not for shock value, but for clarity. 50 years is approximately 18,250 days. Roughly 438,000 hours. Every one of those hours spent in an environment structured around control and deprivation. You will eat more than 54,000 institutional meals. You will shower under supervision for decades. You will sleep feet away from a toilet for half a century. You will watch thousands of other inmates enter the system and leave it, returning to lives you no longer recognize. You will see correctional officers retire, replaced by younger ones who know nothing about who you were. By year 10, your memory of freedom begins to dull. By year 20, institutional life feels normal. By year 30, the outside world feels abstract. By year 40, if you reach it, you are an elderly person who has spent most of adulthood in captivity. Is this more humane than execution, or simply slower? Society avoids this question. We prefer clean narratives. She killed 3 people, including a child. She deserves punishment. End of discussion. But punishment without reflection becomes reflexive. The death penalty is endlessly debated. Long-term imprisonment is treated as self-evidently humane, despite its profound psychological consequences. We tell ourselves that incarceration offers growth, reflection, and redemption. But for someone serving 50 years, those concepts become hollow. There is no reintegration, no second act, only endurance. Some argue that this is precisely what justice demands, that suffering proportional to harm is morally appropriate. This response is emotionally understandable, but it does not answer what the punishment achieves beyond retribution. Does it undo the deaths? Does it heal the survivors? Does it prevent future crimes? Or does it simply satisfy our need to see pain answered with pain? As of December 2025, Amber Perera remains incarcerated. No appeals are pending. No new evidence has emerged. The legal system has moved on. The Felipak family's memorial remains on the Selman Expressway. Tracy Kelly continues to live with her injuries. The witness who followed Perera has returned to ordinary life. Only one thing remains static. Amber Perera sits in her cell, facing 44 more years of the same routine, the same walls, the same knowledge that this will not end until she is elderly or dead. This is not rehabilitation. It is not restoration. It is not primarily about public safety. It is retribution, a deliberate decision to impose decades of suffering because it feels just. That choice may be defensible, but it should be acknowledged honestly. When we sentence someone to 50 years, we are not simply removing them from society. We are imposing a form of living death, one carried out slowly, methodically, and largely out of sight. Whether that serves justice or vengeance is a question society continues to avoid. Final thoughts. Amber Perera is expected to spend the next 4 decades inside a prison cell. Decades that will carry her through every remaining chapter of her life. She will move from adulthood into old age within concrete walls. Her body will weaken. Her memory will fade. Her sense of time will distort. All of it unfolding in a system built to restrain, not to nurture life. The death penalty ends a life in a moment. A 50-year sentence stretches that ending across decades. One is immediate and final. The other is slow, repetitive, and unrelenting. This is not a defense of either outcome. It is an attempt to look honestly at what each one truly represents. When a court hands down a sentence like this, it is not merely imposing punishment. It is deciding how a human being will exist for the rest of their natural life. It is choosing isolation over reintegration, endurance over closure. Time itself becomes the weapon. Is that justice? Is it proportional? Is it what we believe accountability should look like when the harm caused is irreversible? Tracy Kelly said she wanted Amber Perera to hear the word life and feel it taken away. In many ways, that is exactly what happened. But while the Felipak family lost their lives in a single devastating instant, Perera's life is being removed slowly, one day at a time. For tens of thousands of days, she will never get back to, so the question remains. Is a sentence like this more humane than execution, or does it simply disguise cruelty behind longevity? Does long-term imprisonment restore anything that was lost, or does it exist mainly to satisfy our desire for retribution? These are not easy questions, and they are not abstract. They reflect the values we live by and the system we continue to support. Share your thoughts in the comments. This discussion matters, not because it excuses what happened, but because it forces us to confront what our version of justice actually does.